Most of us grew up with that saying, it's better to give than to receive. And personally, I think it's the source of a lot of distortion and difficulty that happens in people's lives. This whole idea that it's blessed to give and it's somehow selfish to receive. Tremendous change, positive change can happen in your life simply by going into the idea that giving and receiving are two sides of the same coin. If you compare them to breathing, that giving might be the out-breath, the exhalation, and receiving is the in-breath. When the air comes to fill the body, you really can't live without the two sides of the inhalation and the exhalation. And you really can't live a life that's healthy without the outpouring, that's the giving, but also the inpouring, that's the receiving. One of the things that I've noticed a lot over the years of giving readings is how often women are trained to feel comfortable giving and not receiving. And one of the things that I've heard so many times in different versions were women who were saying, you know, I've given and I've given and I've given and I've given and I did this and I did that, and they kept a really long checklist of all the different genuinely heroic actions they had taken on behalf of people in their life or organizations that they were in, and then their anger and their frustration when they weren't receiving back what they considered their due. And I don't want to be putting this out as if women are the only ones who overgive, because I've certainly heard the topic also from men. But I would say women are culturally trained. This is just the way to be. Overgive and then hope for the best. And maybe, regardless of your gender, you might identify in this scenario of giving everything to a person or a situation, giving from the absolute bottom of your soul, and then feeling so hurt, so resentful when you didn't get back what you expected, what you thought might be your so-called return on the investment. You know, I think part of how this works is most people aren't keeping track of what you've given. In fact, I think on a psychic level, there are many people, my psychic teacher used to call them spiritual vampires, who can sense, oh, this person's an overgiver. That's amazing. The buffet table's open. I'll go up and I'll refill my plate 20 times. You know, to some people, if you have the tendency to give in a very compulsive way, because down deep it's a longing for love or it's a longing for reciprocation, then people who are natural takers can often see this as a real place to feast. And then, if you're an overgiver, you can become more and more drained. So a lot of what we're going to do on this recording today is look at creating the balance of giving and receiving in your life so that the tendencies to overdo and to overgive can start to become more balanced, and especially the comfort of relaxing and opening to receiving can come more into the foreground. There's a very simple psychic diagnostic technique that you can do just to see the level of giving and receiving in your life. So if you can close your eyes for a moment, I thought we might try this. What percentage of your life do you spend giving? Just take the first number that comes. Your inner self will just show you a number between 0 and 100. Whatever it is, take it. And now, what percentage of your life do you spend receiving? You know, it's not uncommon for people that are overgivers to have 90% or 95% of their life be about overgiving. And a lot of times when I've taught this real simple diagnostic in classes, people's giving numbers have been somewhere between 80 and 99%. By the time I learned that diagnostic exercise, which was about 15 years ago, I was continuing my work, which is as a psychic and an astrologer. And I had given about 10,000 readings by that point. I think now it's up to something insane, like 25,000. But anyway, I'd given about 10,000 readings, and I was exhausted. I was so exhausted. So, of course, I go in and I'm looking at these numbers, and I was about 95% giving, 5% receiving. Now, it's not surprising that about the time that I learned the diagnostic, I also got diagnosed with a pretty serious imbalance in my body. I was pretty ill. And I think that's one of the things that's very common, is people will create illnesses who are overgivers as one of the only ways that they're allowed to receive time and attention back from other people. And one of the only ways that they're allowed to rest is simply to go create an illness, and then you can get the attention. So that's what had happened to me. And as a result of that, and of learning the diagnostic, I began to take really simple steps to change things. I knew I had to change things dramatically, or I was going to get even sicker, and I was going to be in serious trouble. So at that point that I realized my life had to change, the first step I took was a very simple one, and it's one that you can take as well if you're willing. I simply began to put out a prayer that said, "Turn me into somebody who can receive. Let me become somebody who's comfortable receiving. And let me receive what's meant for me." Now, you can make your prayer up however you want it to be, but the gist of it was that it didn't rely on my own strength to try to figure out how to become somebody who was comfortable receiving, because truthfully, I don't think I could have figured it out through my own intelligence. At that point, since I was about 3 years old, I'd been massively overgiving. So just putting out that prayer, saying, "Okay, God, okay," to my inner self, "I want to know how to receive. Make me into somebody who can do this. Reveal the part of me that is comfortable giving and receiving both, who has these two sides in balance." And I really suggest that you have a prayer like that happening in your life. If you have a tendency to overgive, and if you have a tendency to say, "I'm not comfortable receiving," I would say change the language today. Start to tell yourself, "I used to be uncomfortable receiving, but strangely, oddly, it's starting to change. And then immediately begin to do a prayer which says, turn me into somebody who's comfortable receiving.